You're watching the Scottish Football Zone with all the build-up and reactions.
Hello, good evening to you, and welcome to the Scottish Football Zone special. It feels as though that we're never away these days because there's always football every 2 or 3 days. But we're going to be focusing on one club and one club only for the next hour. We're going to talk about St Johnstone Football Club and the Championship. And also, as well, I'm just going to take this opportunity to say, if you want to subscribe to the Scottish Football Zone YouTube channel, please do so indeed. And if you're that way inclined, if you're on TikTok, there you go. That's aggressive. So we're going to talk about St Johnstone. So who else but to ask on the show that the voice of St Johnstone, I would say, Alistair Blair is the historian of St Johnstone, and he's not made the Football Zone the team this season because he failed a late fitness test. But no, it's brilliant to have Alistair here and also Callum as a St Johnstone fan. And also, you know this man, up to my left-hand side, it's Robbie Collins as well. So we're going to talk about all things St Johnstone for the next hour. If you want to leave a comment, you can do that. We're on Facebook, Facebook, YouTube, X, and Instagram tonight as well. So welcome to the show, Alistair and Callum.
Nice to be here. It's a long time since I've been on your show, as you know, but that's probably a good thing for your ratings.
Yeah, well, maybe not. We've kind of the wise voice on the show, and it's none of us, to be honest with you. Maybe Robbie, but I don't know. Alistair's got a new book out. We're going to be talking about that. In fact, let's just give it a wee plug now. There we go. We're going to talk about the book in a wee minute or two, and we're going to talk about the testimonial Alistair is working on as well. And but first of all, your first place in the championship. How has the season been going so far, Callum?
Really well. I think probably better than most of us expected at this stage. 5 points ahead, and to be honest, seeing Ross County languishing down at the bottom and almost mathematically not able to catch us at this point is quite funny. I think it's potentially one game away from them not being able to catch us mathematically. And yet they were supposed to be running away with it at the start of the season.
Alistair, how's life in the championship?
Well, for a start, there's no VAR, which is brilliant. I cannot begin to explain how good that is. To be able to celebrate a goal, you have a quick look at the linesman, and if he's heading up to the halfway line, you know it's a goal. So that's a definite plus. The not such good plus is obviously it's far less money for the club, but the real pluses, as Callum said, is that we're top of the league. We have been since day one, and we're winning more often than we're not. If we get promoted, obviously that won't be the case, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. The fact is we're actually, as Callum said, doing, I think you're right, Callum, better than expected, because we thought Ross County would be the main challenger, and they've obviously that's not materialised. I don't think, with greatest respect to any Thistle fans that are watching and probably putting rude comments in the comment thing, I don't think we thought Thistle would actually sustain the challenge, but they have. And I don't know what you think, Callum, but I actually think there's a number of teams that play really good football. Dunfermline have been great against us. Airdrie have been really good, in terms of playing good football. But Thistle just kept on winning.
Yeah, I think the best team we've played all season has been Airdrie, which probably is a weird one, but I think they've played the best football, and I don't know. Every single time I've seen them, there's probably one or two players that I'm like, wish we'd gone for them, or could see us picking them up. So there's certainly a few across the championship I would take.
I think the other thing, Michael, sorry to interrupt, is that we've actually got to a position by which, I don't know what Callum thinks, but I thought on Saturday you could see the players getting a wee bit nervous. They certainly were against Queen's Park. And that's the thing, is actually just getting over the line. That's quite hard. It'll be the same for Hearts in the Premier, because obviously I know quite a lot of Hearts fans, and you ask them, are you going to win the league? And they all say, I don't want to talk about it, And it's a wee bit like that with Saints fans. I don't know what you think, Callum, but it's a bit like, well, let's just wait till we've done it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at, there's not actually many who have been played in the Premiership in the squad, or at least not won the Championship before. You've got Gullen, Stanton, Baird, boys. They've never really challenged at the top end of the league before. I know that Stanton and Gullen had that spell at Wraith, but they fell short as well.
Robbie, Alistair was saying about VAR and the VAR and the Championship, but we're still having the same old issues, obviously, with Millen, but all the teams as well. But how brilliant is it to see St Johnstone? And I don't know if this is a bit unfair for me to say, Callum and Alistair. I'll find out in a minute if you shut my microphone up. But the attendances has went up at McDermott Park in the last season. Would that be fair for me to say?
Yeah, the season ticket numbers have definitely went up in the summer. Can't remember how much by. Alistair might be able to confirm that, but it was certainly substantial growth, and I think it comes from, to be honest, we had about 3 years of negative football that we've no longer got that. As much as we went down under Siwo is the one who's actually played football that's been, you thought you might actually score from at some point, rather than play for a 0-0, and I think that's probably encouraged more people to go along.
Yeah, I think the last time I was probably on your show, Michael, which was probably when Saints were the Premier, if you'll recollect that the words Craig and Levine featured quite regularly. And it's fair to say, not in a positive way. So, yeah, I think what Callum says is right. We do play football on the deck. Sometimes we get a bit bored because we pass the ball to death. Sometimes we're not as quick. The best team we've played, I agree with Callum in terms of the Championship, but we played Motherwell at the start of the season, the League Cup, and we took them to extra time, which was, to be fair, some achievement when you see what they're doing now. And you could see then that they were a totally different team from last season. And you guys will have seen it watching your teams in the Premier. They are a really, really good football team. And that's the kind of team I think clubs should try and aspire to be like that, playing the way they play. And ironically, they've got a guy in Elliot Watt who, when we got him, was overweight and slow and pretty rubbish. And he's now one of the best players in the Premier.
Aye, Motherwell certainly do look a good side, but guys, you're speaking about Simo Valakari, and I agree. The last match I watched was St Johnstone 2, Partick Thistle 2 with a Smith late penalty. But I've been really impressed every time I've watched St Johnstone this season with his style. Do you think, obviously, if St Johnstone going to win the league, which, of course, if you keep up the form you saw at the start of the season, I think that'll be a possibility, and I think you probably will. If that happens, do you think there's any threat of Simo maybe leaving St Johnstone to go to a bigger outfit? That's obviously no disrespect to St Johnstone, but it comes naturally with every manager.
Well, I was going to say that, I mean, the words no disrespect to St Johnstone, obviously. Well, you mean like you can go to St Mirren, you mean? Because you'll be looking for a new manager soon the way you're going, So, I don't know. You know what? I don't buy it. You see all the pictures of players kissing the badge and all that kind of stuff. They're professionals, If somebody comes in and offers to double your salary, you're going to think about it. Not for very long. That's the only thing I would say. So I think he likes the club. I think he likes the owner. That's the impression I get. He certainly likes the fans. He's very good going around the town. But money talks. So I don't kid myself that if we get promoted and somebody comes looking for another manager, yeah, I mean, Aberdeen will look for a manager every couple of weeks, so there's a reasonably good chance, that one of these times they might come go for him. I don't know. What do you think, Al?
I think there's only one team that might have a chance of taking him, and that would be actually based on where the Motherwell manager goes. I think if the Motherwell manager goes, Simo goes to Motherwell. I think it'd be a good fit. Kind of Simo's trying to play the same type of football. Apart from that, I look at the success our managers have had in previous years. I mean, how Tommy Wright never got a gig elsewhere, never got linked to anything after the years of success he had, makes me feel like I don't think a Saints manager will get too much recognition and go on elsewhere. I mean, as much as we can see what Davidson's done since he left Saints, that season he won the double. I think, was it Preston sacked our manager, one of his former clubs, and you thought he was a shoe in there? Didn't even get interviewed from what I heard or talked about, and that was kind of a big surprise on that. You would have thought that would be the type of job for him.
No,
Sorry,
I was just going to say, Robbie, we'll go on to speak about Alaska's book, but Callum brings up a point, Robbie and Alaska, that I've been making on the show for ages and ages and ages. Callum Davison is a nice guy. I've spoken to him a few times. Obviously, he won the double. He went to Ibrox, and the rest is history, as I say. But it's a risk of kind of Scottish football and maybe football kind of in general outside Scotland is a bit snobby in terms of like Seymour's doing a brilliant job now. Callum Davison, Tommy Wright was doing a brilliant job. I would maybe put David Martindale into that bracket as well. Was the financial struggles that Livingston had week season in, season out. So if what I'm saying is, guess clubs kind of like bypass managers that's on your doorstep, Alice, and look kind of like elsewhere.
I don't know. I think there's a tendency. Well, if you look at the track record of managers, dare I say it, at Celtic and Rangers this season, it's taken them several attempts to get it right. There are one or two, and to be fair, Robbie, your manager is good, and you can see that the way you won the cup. But in my view, there's relatively few great managers. There's an awful lot of bog standard ones, and then there's one or two who get a wee bit lucky, and then they fail again. But at the top level, you tend in England, you see the same names going around all the time. In Scotland, I think people are looking abroad, and again, like Motherwell, you occasionally get lucky. In a lot of other cases, you don't, or you see the same guys. And no, this is not meant to be having to go at any particular club, but guys who move around from championship club to championship club. None of these clubs necessarily succeed, but they do all right. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I think, yes, there is a degree of snobbishness. You can also see it. Every club, not just Saints, but every club outside the old firm feels that they've got players who should have played for Scotland at some time in the last 20, 30 years, but didn't get in the squad because they play for somebody that's not Celtic or Rangers. Conversely, you see people, Tosh McKinley comes to mind, goes to Celtic, gets a game for Scotland. So I think a lot of fans believe that's the case, and in some cases I suspect it is.
I think just on that point, it's interesting because I think what you might potentially see domestically anyway in Scotland is teams will look at the likes of Jens Berthel Askew and try and replicate that. So what you're going to probably find is teams now are going to either go for a manager that's got attractive style of football, hence why I asked the question about Valakari. Teams might look at that and try and recreate what Motherwell were doing this season, or they might try and also go for the Jens route and try and go somewhere else, somewhere across the land, which, neither's really a bad choice, but I think I'd personally like to see more managers come for the sort of lower leagues in Scotland anyway and try and sort of give them a chance. I think it can make the lower leagues growth and sort of the Premiership stand out more as well.
I don't know, Robbie, man. I know what you mean. It's a bit like I'd like to see more Scottish players playing because there's a serious problem with that. But if you, again, Callum, we were allegedly interested quite some time ago in Rhys McCabe when he was at Airdrie and he was doing a great job. and then of course it fell off a cliff at Airdrie. So would he have been a good, famously, Jeff Brown brought in John Connolly, who was, in my view, the greatest St Johnstone player there's ever been. And Jeff said within a week he knew it was the wrong decision. It's really, really hard. I don't know what you think, Callum. Do you think is it one of these ones by which, well, dare I use the words Craig Levine again,
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a safe pair of hands, really, that, a managerial appointment's ever going to 100% work. If I'm going to be honest, with the names that were touted around and Saints were apparently interviewing at the point of appointing Simo, looking at their CVs, I would have taken Simo out over Scott Brown, Peter Levin, or I can't remember who the Northern Irish guy was that we're looking at, but the guy who wanted apparently triple his salary in order to come to Scottish football. So that was I put Saints off before they appointed Simo. But looking at the 4 people that were touted as interviewed, I would have taken Simo every day of the week based on his CV.
When we set this channel up, it seems like 10 years ago now, but it wasn't. It was maybe 12. We thought, well, let's do a channel. Let's do a channel on a Friday night to talk about Scottish football, but also let's focus on different clubs and aspects of football that we don't see on Sky, BBC, or whatever. So that's when I approached Alistair to see if we can do a show focusing on St Johnstone. And I think for once in my life, Rory, I got my timing spot on, because Alistair was writing a book about St Johnstone. And so I suppose that the first question would be, why did you want to write a book about the club that you love?
Well, in the case of this particular book, it's because we'd written about most other things, to be honest. So we've done 2 versions of the official history, and we did the one in 2015, which was the second version after we won the Scottish Cup. We then go and win the Scottish, the 2 cups, the cup double. That was far too soon to do it, because bear in mind, these things don't just happen in 5 minutes. The first one took 7 years. The follow-up one took about a year and a half. We then did one on Great Saints, which was brilliantly timed because it's when COVID was on, so there was nothing else happening, so that gave me plenty of time. Excuse me. And I do it with Brian Doyle. Sorry guys, a bit of a cough. Brian is one of the most important people for St Johnstone who exists, because many decades ago he was in the pub having an argument whether Henry Hall played in the same team as Alec MacDonald, and he said, I'll go and find out. So he went to the library, found out that he did, and since then he's collected every statistic that you could possibly have on St Johnstone. So you can be in a pub with a mate who says, my uncle played for Saints in the 1930s. You can message Brian and he'll send you the complete playing record in about 5 minutes. So he provides the structure. The club have let me read the minutes, which helps an awful lot, which go back to 1910, which is the first recorded minutes there are. So you get a lot of stuff which you don't get otherwise. And of course, the best thing about it is, because you're a fan, is that you get to speak to your heroes. That's just, it's so good that you can phone up and you can talk to. Most people won't have a clue these people are. John Connolly, Jimmy Donaldson. And we've talked to guys who played in the 1930s even. So you get that historical continuity. And the thing about the current book is that Muirton was a very important ground, because the club could easily have gone bust. A couple of seasons beforehand, they nearly went out of business. They had to have a sort of share issue to get the money for this, and it cost £13,000 to build. And since then, and a lot of people watching this will have probably been in Muirton, certainly the older ones, obviously. It was a classic Scottish ground, but it was falling apart towards the end. And the one thing you learn about this, and I corresponded with Adam Webb through Outix, asked him to write the foreword. And once he'd finished, because I used to send him the chapters, and it took about, the whole thing was about a year and a half again. And he'd come back with comments, and I don't think he knew an awful lot about Saints history. He'd done his due diligence in terms of the club, but he didn't really know much more, I think, other than what he got from probably Wikipedia. I may be doing him a disservice. But the one thing he said that, again, you can see it in the foreword, was nothing changes. Nothing changes. It's all about there's not enough money. There's always people looking for more money. The manager's looking for more money. The players are looking for more money. The fans are hacked off because things aren't going well. There's people stealing things, all the sort of negative stuff, which just goes with running any business. And of course, you realise it's a business. It's a different kind of business to any other kind of business because it involves football and all the passion that goes with that. And again, if you look at the caricatures on the front of it, which are done by Steve Bright, who's just a brilliant cartoonist, does the Sun, he's done the Record, Sunday Times, all sorts of stuff. And you get people there who people will recognise, like Stuart Cosgrove, Ailey Barber, and then some famous players. And then you've got people like Mary Gibson, who everybody's heard of, Aggie Moffat, the tea lady that took on Souness. With the greatest respect, can't hold a candle to Mary Gibson, because Mary Gibson started she was at the first game at Muirton Park in 1924, and she was at the last game in 1989, and she worked from the club from just after the Second World War right up to the 80s. And if you talk to people, as I've been fortunate enough to do, like Sir Alex Ferguson and Ali McCoist, they absolutely loved her a bit. And it's that kind of family thing. And interestingly, I was going to be tangent here, actually, Michael, but as you know, I also help run the Scottish Football Union. I was at Hampden today for the Scottish Round Table, and the Minister, Marie Todd, made particular mention of St Johnstone and what a brilliant, well-organised club and how good it is to the community. And she was talking about SEMO again and the guys who go out and see old fans who are stuck in their houses and all that kind of stuff. And it does make, and I know other clubs do this kind of stuff, but when you've got a minister from the government, and nobody was asking her to do this, coming out with this kind of stuff, that just makes you feel really good.
Callum, can I ask you, as a St Johnstone fan, how was it for you to read that book?
I've not read it yet. I've got a copy of it.
I should have asked you that before.
I think it only came out in November. I've got to see one, though. I've not had a chance to read anything.
There you go. Well, you, I was going to say you've been let off the hook there, but I don't know if Alistair will speak to you ever again after that. But I suppose because you've got a wee one, I can see why you've not had time about it. But Robert, how important is it for noting like clubs like St Johnstone and obviously your club, St Mirren, and other clubs to write a kind of book about the history of the football club?
Yeah, it can be massive. St Mirren don't have a book yet. Nobody's really plucked up the courage to actually write one, so it'll be interesting to see if that ever happens. But no, it is really big. It's big for, like, people sort of growing up supporting the club, Michael. Me, I've been following the St Mirren since about 2017. No too fond of the history fully, to be honest, as much as I probably could be. So books like this can help a fan growing up want to learn more about the club, want to know more about the background, a bit about the history. It can make a fan's history stand out a lot more. You want to talk to the best of your ability about the club you support. So books like this can really, really help that, and it's obviously important for the club as well. Clubs like this sort of stuff happening. You've seen the sort of publicity that's going face at Johnstone. Alistair, obviously, just as I'm Googling the book and stuff like that, seeing you with SEMO, both of you holding the book, that's obviously a good memory for you as well. And I'm sure the club appreciates stuff like that as well, so it's absolutely massive.
No, SEMO, he said, because I said to him, we're getting the photographs taken, I said, you must be really used to this. He went, you never get used to it, and he said, I can't try and do his accent, but he said, let's try and win some history for you for another book. I'm thinking, bloody hell, give me a chance, just finish this one, because as I said, it does take a long time. I mean, it's not just sitting down and whacking stuff in. You've got to absolutely, and this is where Brian Dell comes into his own, because Brian is the kind of person who you'll write something, you say, Kenny Aird scored in the 17th minute of the game against St Mirren, and that was the winning goal. And Brian will come back and go, well, actually, it was the 16th minute, And the thing is, he's absolutely right. And to go back to your point, Robbie, when we did the Great Saints book, And we got to speak to Alex Ferguson, and he said, and it's in the foreword of the book, without its history, a football club's nothing. If you take Celtic, Rangers, the two biggest clubs in Scotland, without their history, they're just a bunch of guys who turn up on a Saturday, and 40,000 people go watch them for some reason. And the thing about the Dunkeld Road book is it's to some extent a business history, because it looks at all the things behind it, the money, where it's coming from, or most often not coming from. And then we've got fans' memories in it as well, because I think that's really important, because a football club, again, is nothing without the fans. So every chapter's got, between each chapter, there's fans' reminiscences about Muirton. And that's, for a lot of people, there's guys going back to games just after the Second World War. So there's memories going way, way back. And again, that's important in terms of making people realise that this is an institution that's been in Perth since 1885, not 1884, as unfortunately the club seems to think, but we'll not go in that particular rabbit hole just now. And actually, at that time, it was the club that came through. There was other clubs in Perth like there are everywhere, but that was the one that succeeded. And if you compare us in really since the 60s to other comparable towns like Hamilton or whatever else, we actually are doing much, or even Ayr, we're doing much, much better. And that's down to the people running the club behind the scenes. So Jeff Brown, for example, without Jeff Brown, we quite possibly wouldn't be in existence. And it really makes a hell of a difference who's behind the scenes and running the club, because we've seen, I think there's been about 9 clubs going into administration in the last couple of decades. Now, they're all still in existence, which is great, because the system's set to keep them going. But Saints have been phenomenally successful for a city the size of Perth.
I suppose, Callum, that a lot of people from the outside looking in, if they don't follow football, or maybe other sports as well, they're thinking, well, it's 11 guys, play football every week, and, the supporters rock up at the game, and then they go away, and then they come out on a cold Wednesday night and a Saturday, and they do that for the whole season. But as me, you, Robbie, and Alistair knows, that's not the case, because just to give you an example, and you'll be aware, Callum and Alistair, more than me and Robbie does about what St Johnstone does off the park. But I know that St Johnstone runs a food bank, maybe not every home game, but certain games throughout the season. They invite the away fans as well to come and place a food into the food bank. So it's not really just a football team, as Alistair was saying. There's more to it than that.
Definitely. I think it is every home game that they do it. But going back to a situation, my brother's a teacher, and as much as we're based in Dunfermline, he had a pupil in his class maybe 2.5 years ago now, maybe 3, who was a Ukrainian refugee, didn't speak any word of English, didn't speak. All he wanted to do was play football, and that was it. So my brother thought, right, well, Saints at that point had Max Kucheravi, who's at that time was the only Ukrainian player playing in Scotland. So he contacted the club, and actually it was Gus McPherson, who said, look, we'll see what we can do. And I think Max was all known at Falkirk at the time. And after training with Falkirk, he drove past the school and dropped in with Gus McPherson. And Sean said, my brother, he's never seen a happier pupil, and a kid who was basically absolutely in his shell came out and he was able to speak his own language, ask questions to a professional footballer, and he played football with them. He says that is something that he will never, ever be able to explain how proud he was at the fact that his club had somebody who was able to do that and make a pupil, a refugee, feel so welcome in the country. And that's, to me, is a prime example of why these community initiatives, and to be honest, football clubs are so much more important than, as you say, just 11 people kicking a ball about on a Saturday.
Alistair?
No, I think, again, with my football union hat on, I mean, the social media stuff that we share on a regular basis, not every club has got the same. Most of them do have, food bank collections. Most of them do, but not all of them do. And it's great because you get, as you said, Michael, you get fans of other clubs. They'll advertise before on social media. If you're coming to the game, if you're a United fan on Saturday, bring some stuff. And people do that. It's a bit like the fan zones, which are starting to creep into the game now. It means you're getting fans mixing before the game. And my experience, not just with the Football Union hat on, but as a football fan for many more years than I care to remember, most fans, you get them together, not during the game, obviously, but before and after the game, they're quite happy to sit and chat and be quite reasonable. And, like there's 3 different supporters on this show tonight. And it's not a problem to talk about football and your team. And okay, there's a little bit of taking the mickey and all that kind of stuff, but that's fine. But there's not any inherent nastiness. And that, to my mind, going back to Adam Webb, he wants to get more sort of families involved. That's why he's obviously got the safe standing area. Those kind of things are really important. Pricing is really important. We've obviously had the debate, and it's not binding at Holyrood about price cap for away fans. There are difficulties with that because it might well lose clubs money, which you don't want because you want to spend it on players. But these are the kind of things that really matter. So you look at Gordon Small, who sat beside me for a long time, but Gordon had a stroke. Saints have kept his season ticket. They haven't sold it to anybody else. So when he wants it back, he can get it when he's fit to get it back. Simo went to see him in his house, and chatted to him for an hour. Other clubs do the same things. They're not holding up Saints as being, all of a sudden different or exemplary. Loads of clubs do. Your own clubs do as well. But this is where football is much more important, as Callum says. I mean, the refugee story is just brilliant because that's not even somebody who could speak English. So I do think these things are important. And then I know we're going to talk about David Witherspoon and the testimonial later on because, apart from that, I chair it. Callum's the treasurer, and it might be interesting for you guys to learn a bit more about what goes into that. And also for any Saints fans listening to find out what's happening as well, because they'll be wanting to know. So, but it's very. I've never come across anybody that I've approached, fan or a player, to say, "Look, we're doing this book about St Johnstone. Can you help?" I can't think of anybody who said no. And the players, the former players, are delighted, absolutely delighted, because somebody's remembered them.
Robert, it's brilliant to see. Obviously, through our work with the Scottish Football Union, we done a campaign on different issues about pyros, about fans getting involved in football and the ugly side of the game, but we actually forget about the beautiful side of the game. I think that's why we call it the beautiful game, because obviously you've got food banks, but also you've got like football memories as well. You've got like different projects within the game as well. St Johnstone, yes, they're just one club, but they're all about like the community, and that's what you want to see.
100%, Michael. And both stories told by Callum and Alistair were absolutely brilliant in their own ways. And I think it really does sum up what a community club is. You're starting to see a lot more of them, especially in Scottish football. You hear so many good stories, and it can, a football club can just pull a community together. It really can. It's, that season when St Johnstone won the Cup double, for example, that's a day I'm sure Alistair, Callum, and every other St Johnstone fan will never forget as long as they live. Like, it's moments like that, and I'm sure a lot of them turned out to the games with their parents or whatever and stuff like that, and just sharing moments with each other. But you're right, Michael, the offside, the off of the pitch stuff as well is just amazing. The food banks that St Johnstone do, I know my club do a lot of them as well. It's just moments like, Simo getting out of that person, just as you said, Alistair, that stuff that footballers and football managers and all the rest of it, they take time out of their day to go and do that. That's that they feel like that's still part of their job. That feels like that's part of their duties, and that's the way it should be. That's the way every club should follow. So I'm really impressed, especially by St Johnstone, because you see a lot of it online with all the hard work that they do, and it gets really good recognition as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing touching this before about how do you get young kids to go along? Now, Callum's 3-month-old has been to his first game, which I'll let Callum tell you about in a minute or two, right? And not only that, but I know that he's got a season ticket already. Is that right, Callum?
Yeah, got it from his granddad for his Christmas.
Oh, wow.
How much did he enjoy the game at 3 months?
I've got absolutely no idea. He didn't cry at any point, which was a benefit. So take that. I mean, if to try and go 2 hours without him crying is pretty good going. I'll take that.
What? Not even when Ayr United scored?
No, he seemed absolutely unfazed at all.
I tell you, I was slightly phased. I must admit, because it was 2 minutes after we'd scored. And I know that Callum's dad is my accountant, but also a very long-standing friend. And I remember Sean, who Callum was talking about, his older brother, he was taking his first game at 6 months against Albion Rovers. And the Daily Record photographer was there, and he appeared on the front page of the Daily Record sports supplement under the heading St. John's Son. And this was Sean, who was in one of these baby hold-all things, which his dad did. I don't know how your mum let your dad away with it, to be honest, but anyway. And it was, I think that was the second last time it was at Albion Rovers, but that's another thing, going back to the sort of history. It's all right if you sport, well, Celtic, Rangers obviously have had a slight hiatus by going down the leagues, but I think you talk to Rangers fans, I bet they enjoyed that. I bet they enjoyed going around these grounds. They didn't enjoy being put out there, but obviously, when you've been watching Saints as long as I have, I mean, Callum's a fair bit younger, so he's not quite used to that level of entertainment, shall we say, that you get traipsing down to Stranraer and all that kind of stuff. It's brilliant.
I've been, Alistair. I've been almost every 42 to see Saints play.
Well, that doesn't surprise me knowing your dad. But do you know what I mean? I don't know about you, Robbie and Michael, but I mean, when you go to away games down the divisions, is that not just a sort of breath of fresh air?
It is, aye. It's very different, but in a very good way as well. It feels a lot more local. I think one of probably the best memories for me is going to actually watch the Rocks play a game. It's my first probably ever time going to that low a game in that low level without sort of reaching the point I got to watch my uncle play for an over 35s team in a plastic pitch somewhere up south or up north, sorry. But just going to St. Rocks, teams like that as well. I don't know if you guys have found it, but they're so hospitality driven. They treat you very well. They'll give you stuff. They'll show you around the club. They'll tell you a bit about the background, and that's good experiences to have as well. So I definitely agree.
It doesn't always apply, because there was, dare I say it, Kilty. That wasn't a good experience. But you're right.
I don't know. My first experience at Kelty was quite good. I'm not going to say anything about the rest of it.
No, probably. Well, it's like, again, Stenhousemuir. I remember we got gubbed 4-0 at Stenhousemuir, and there was fans screaming blue murder at Paul Sturrock and Jeff Brown because we'd been hammered, and which was a little bit OTT when you consider what Sturrock then went and did. But that's what fans are like, But it is. I really like going down the division. Sounds terribly patronising because we're down the divisions now, but it's just how Scottish football used to be. Maybe it's just because I'm older and there's that degree of nostalgia. But one of the things that came out in the Muirn book, people talked about the smell of tobacco in the stand in particular, because of course everybody smoked in those days. And so some of their abiding memories were the smell as much as anything else, Plus changing ends at half time. That's something which, Robbie, you're far too young to remember. Michael might, I don't know, but do you remember fans changing ends at half time?
I don't, but am I right in saying that the linesmen used to change sides at half time?
I don't know about that, but certainly if you go back to when I first started going to Muirn, all the away fans would go behind the goal their team was attacking, and then at half time they would all cross over again. So they'd go through the enclosure, and no problem at all. And it meant that you were obviously cheering on your team, hopefully scoring, although if you're getting beaten 5-0, it's a bit disappointing.
So if I can just sort of ask you to, you've sort of, spoke about the history and stuff. What is your guys' sort of earliest memories of watching your club?
Well, my earliest memory, apart from going to loads of games and, to be honest, actually knowing a lot of Scottish geography purely by going to all the games. So, admittedly, we're in the first division, and we went through a spell of, I think Stranraer were up in the leagues and various things like that. So that's where I've been to most of the grounds. One of my earliest ones was in 2006. I remember my mum and dad having an argument. Saints were playing Rangers in the League Cup. And all I remember was my mum's obeying words to my dad saying, if they win, you'll regret it. So I didn't think anything of it. Later on, came back from school. Mum got us, me and my two brothers in the car, said, we're going to meet your dad. And then we drove through to Glasgow. Turns out that what my mum had said to my dad was, if Saints win, you'll regret not taking the boys. So we all went through Ibrox to see St Johnstone, who were in the first division at the time, beat Rangers 2-0 in the League Cup quarter-finals. And when the first goal went in, which was an overhead kick by Stephen Milne, my tooth fell out. The whole Saints fans went forward, and I leapt 2 rows in front, and my uncle actually caught me, who didn't have a clue that I was there, caught me in his arms while celebrating. So that's mainly my first memory of a game.
Well, I remember being at that's not my first memory of a game, but I do remember being at that game because I worked in advertising. The Herald, all the papers had boxes and things there. So the guy who was the commercial director of the Herald was actually a massive Rangers fan. But fair play to him, he used to invite me a game once a season because we were spending shitloads of money, so he's kind of honour bound to. But he said to me, look, if ever St Johnstone are playing Rangers or Celtic, I'll get you to the hospitality. And fair play to him, he gave me the 3 tickets they had. So my wife and I, and wasn't my son, I can't remember, neither of my sons went. Anyway, doesn't matter. So we are there in the hospitality, and it's entirely Rangers fans. And they had Robert Pritz as their guest in the hospitality, and they're saying, what do you think the score will be? And he's going, I'll be about 3-0 to Rangers. So we are sitting surrounded by all the Rangers fans, and I'm trying to sit in my hands. And then as Callum says, Milne scored that first goal, the overhead kick, and I'm still managing to sit in my hands. And then we went 2-0 up, and the Rangers fans were starting to get quite, how can I put this, animated. And I'm, by this stage, thinking, I could well die here if this goes on. But then for the last 10 minutes, the Rangers fans started leaving. Now, these are the posh seats, so you probably were fairly safe. And I do remember shouting, I can't remember who was that, shouting to one of the Saints players, what's the effect of get the ball up the park or something like that? There may have been one or two that were involved. And then thinking, nobody's killed me, I'm all right. And we went to the lounge and there was nobody there. I remember phoning up my younger son, and I just held my phone up and said, listen to that. And it was Callum and all the rest of them in the wee corner of the Saints fans. So I do remember that. But the first game I remember being at was, in the 60s against Dunfermline, I think. And I bought the programme, because that's what you did in those days. And we were behind one of the goals, and Freddie Aitken had this shot which hit me. I hit the programme. So I got this scuffed mark on the programme, which I've kept to this day, though the scuff mark's faded. And I have actually told Freddie Aitken this story since then. So that was my first game. So I'm conscious also, Michael, that we're probably got about 15 minutes left, and I'd quite like to, if you don't mind, move on to Spoonie's testimonial, because I don't know, most people in watching this will probably not have been involved in putting together a testimonial committee. And I got a phone call from David actually saying, look, could you chair this? I think they probably asked about 40 people already, and they're, coming to me by default. And I said, yes, but I don't live in Perth, because I think, as most people know, I actually live in Ayrshire. Not very convenient. But I said, look, I can certainly organise it. So knowing that Callum was a CA, I said, look, we'll get Callum along. And also Callum's dad's a tax expert, not just a CA. So that's really useful as well. And then you actually consider what you've got to do. Now, I've been on a testimonial committee before. It's an awful lot of work. And what you're basically doing is you've got to organise basic stuff like, Callum, can you organise a bank account? But we want one that's free, because we don't want to pay any money. We're trying not to spend money. We're trying to get money for David, but you've got to be really, really careful. So we were talking about, would we get Ian Witherspoon, his brother, on the committee, because he was also an accountant. And then it was pointed out, you can't do that, because HMRC will then say he's too close to the guy's testimonial it is, and therefore he'll have to pay tax. And Callum will be able to tell you in a minute or two about all the financial side of it, because he knows that better than me. But you're then essentially going around all the club's main sponsors, the people who put money in the club, and asking them for more money. And the club actually don't really like that, because it's taking money away from them. To which the argument is, this is the guy who's won 3 cup medals and played in the World Cup. There is no other St Johnstone player more highly garlanded than David Witherspoon. And he put that cross, took Godget to the cleaners, put the cross over, and we won the cup. So quite frankly, now, to be fair, the club are great. You've got to get on. They get on with it. They're helping us. But you then go into things like, how do you organise a testimonial match? Never mind all the rest of the events. How do you get a club that's going to come and play? Because obviously,
in fairness, Alistair, whilst the club are helping by saying, here's a list of our sponsors, that's kind of it in terms of help from the club, because the club can't, for tax reasons, club can't get involved in any way either. So they're literally giving us, here's a list of our sponsors, which, in fairness, we could have got off the website, in fairness, but that's it. The club, for tax reasons, can't get involved either.
Yeah, which is why Callum's here. I'm chairing it. He's basically keeping me right. So I always say that accountants are there to protect me from my own stupidity, and you've just seen a graphic demonstration of that. But going back to organising a game, so it's well known that the St Johnstone pitch just now resembles a particularly poor paddy field. So spoke to Roddy Grant, and he said, look, 6 weeks work on the pitch this summer. There's no chance you're going to get a game then. The only chance you're going to get is an international break in the autumn. That means we need to get promoted, because otherwise we'll be in the championship when we play it. You've then got to find a team that's prepared to come. So obviously with David, he played for Hibs. That's an obvious one. So he's put out feelers to them, or rather we have, in case HMRC are listening. And then on the back of that, you've actually got to go and look at all sorts of other events. So we've got the dinner sorted out, 27th of February next year. A very, 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 very famous St Johnstone manager will be coming as one of the 2 guest speakers, and you can probably work out who that is. And the other one we are hoping will be another manager who has managed David in his career. But again, I'm just waiting for confirmation of that. So you've got to put all that together. You've got to go to the Sally, you've got to go to the Civvy, get stuff sorted out. Stuart and Tam are going to do a show with Jim Weir, because Jim Weir was at school with Tam. So that's going to be, I think, apologies Saints fans if I've got this date wrong, but the website will be out soon. I think that's 24th of September. So that's Tuesday. 25th, sorry. Listen, I told you he keeps me right. We've got a golf day, which I have a rough idea might be the 7th, but probably isn't, of August. That will be on the island. And then we've got a number of other events which we're trying to organise just now, including an all-day football session. And the idea is that we'll get kids along in the morning. We'll get Alistair Stevenson, the St Johnstone former youth coach, show them how to do the spoonie chop, and then we'll move up to the age ranges and finish walking football. So there's an awful lot of stuff on the go, but the amount of work in it, and the guys who are actually behind us on this, I won't name them all, but the amount of work they are doing, getting around, talking to people, going to venues saying, look, can we get this at a cheaper price because we're all skint, and this is for David Witherspoon. And the response is just brilliant. Sorry, Callum, I'm talking too much as usual. Do you want to shed a bit more light?
No, it's kind of saying, as Alistair said, it's also, I think, people don't necessarily realise actually you can come up with all these different ideas, but the practicalities are a different aspect as well, in terms of, there's probably events that each person individually in the committee would want to do, but you can't just have one person do it. It's, we talked about a darts event, for example, and it wasn't until I was sitting doing the sums, I was like, right, okay, well, you need probably 256 people in order to make that viable. Is it actually going to be viable or not? Which we're still looking at. We're trying to find a way to make it viable, because we are very keen to do that. But it's also, can we make stuff that, going back to the community aspect that you were mentioning earlier, that we can make it actually as almost a community event as well, rather than just us trying to make money for David, but more or less just try to see if we can get simply the community out in support of David as well.
Yeah, and I think, sorry.
No, I was just going to say it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely fantastic day. David's won me many IFM Cups with St Mum, so I thank him for that service. But I just sort of wanted to ask you guys, if you don't mind, what's your sort of favourite memories of David while playing with St Johnstone? Obviously, he's had a very long career at St Johnstone, so is there any that particular stick out to you? Obviously, Alistair, you mentioned he's won the 3 cups he's played at the World Cup. Is there anything else that sort of stands out?
Callum?
I used to work alongside a Dundee fan. So the year after we won the double, I worked alongside a Dundee fan. And as Alistair will know, Saints fans aren't particularly too fond of Paul McGowan, who at that time was at Dundee. And there was a little spell Saints played Dundee in the League Cup and they beat them. And David Witherspoon did the spinny chop and Paul McGowan about 8 or 9 times in the space of about 30 seconds. So I managed to find a clip of that online and I got this guy for Secret Santa. I managed to turn it into a flip book so you could see him doing the trick on Paul McGowan. And that was the Secret Santa present I got him that year. So that's probably what my favourite memory was, seeing him absolutely against Paul McGowan. And I'm pretty certain Paul McGowan went in his arse twice.
I think that I mean the spinny chop, which he obviously practiced, was just phenomenal. And he would take people to cleaners, and they probably knew what he was going to do. But his body movement and the way he actually controlled the ball, I think if the 2014 Cup final, he had a run from his own half in which he seemed to beat about half the Dundee United team. And then he cut into the box on the right, and then he hit a slightly weak shot. Now, if he'd actually scored it, I think most Saints fans will know that Stevie Maskery's goal against Raith Rovers in '89 is probably the one that everyone cites as the best goal in living memory. That would have been better because his balance and his ability to throw people just off balance by the way he moved his body was fun. Well, still is, but he's getting on a wee bit nowadays. And just the joy of watching, I don't know what you guys think, but we've got Josh McPake now, and Josh McPake takes on fullbacks for fun, so they double up on him. But you watch a winger taking on a defender, it's brilliant. It's
well, Alistair, you might not remember, but it was the current Scotland captain that he put in his arse that day as well.
It was, yeah. And he could probably still do it now if the current Scotland captain was getting a game for Liverpool. But I mean, the point I'm making is that's what gets fans off their arse, if you're pardon. I mean, it's just you get off your seat because that skill is what's exciting, and if the goal comes from it, even better. And with my boring historian's hat on, Kenny Aird, probably the greatest winger in Saints history. He was told by Willie Ormond, who was not a bad winger at all in his day, take the throwback on every time because you'll beat him more. Not every time, but when you beat him, we'll score a goal because the game changes. And you can see that. And you can see it with David Witherspoon. His ability to the whole way he actually controls the ball and moves his body and his balance was phenomenal. And I think if he had more goals to his game, a bit like Roddy Grant, if Roddy Grant had some speed, he wouldn't have been at Saints. He'd have gone on to a much, much bigger club and earned a lot more money if he had more goals to his game.
So we've got a few minutes left on the show, and also, Alistair, as by magic, we have managed to get the Argan Webb interview lined up. We're going to play that in a wee minute or two because I didn't know how to do that, but I passed it on to my learned friend Reagan, who's the brains behind the machine, and he's managed to pull the interview together. We're going to play that out in a minute, but you were saying about the testimonial there. How can people get along to the dinner? Is it a special website that you set up for the Spooners testimonial, or I mean, how can people get involved?
Well, there's a Facebook page. We will produce probably an X, probably Instagram as well. We haven't got those yet. There is a website sitting on my computer which is not live yet because we haven't got all the dates yet. But we've got a committee meeting coming up, I think on the 9th. Again, Callum will keep me right. So
yeah, next week.
Which I'd better write an agenda for. Believe it or not, folks, we actually are really quite organised. So yeah, there will be a website probably the next couple of weeks, but the Facebook page just now has got, if you go to the Facebook page, that will have any updates. And as I said, there's an awful lot of work, going on behind the scenes. A lot of people getting in touch with venues, trying to get hold of Gus McPherson so we can organise the day on the Astro. All that kind of stuff is going on behind the scenes just now, and it's with a view to actually, the whole point about this is to make as much money as possible tax-free for a guy who is it's an overused word, but a genuine legend of St Johnstone.
So we're going to come back and round up and tell people how to get the book as well. But before we do that, we've managed to, as I say, pull off the interview that Alistair did. I think that was it last year that you did the interview with Adam Webb?
You're asking, I think it probably was, because it was, again, it's with the Football Union hat on, but it was just trying to get his ideas about what America could bring to the Scottish game. So I think it was till end of last year. Yeah.
And by the way, when I say to people about Adam Webb, it's not the pop star that we're talking about. It's the majority shareholder of St Johnstone, so slightly different and not British. So yeah, it's a good interview. So we've managed to get the interview. So I think we're going to hear from Adam Webber now about St Johnstone and Scottish football, and then we'll be back to tell people how you can get your sales pitch and ask about how people can get your fantastic book and stuff. So there you go. So we're just going to get the interview lined up now. If I can get my here we go. So here's Alistair talking to Adam Webb about life, St Johnstone, and life in football in Scotland.
I think there's a few levels of that. First of all, as we've discussed previously, and as you've addressed today, I definitely want to integrate the positives of the American sporting experience where we can. Obviously, you can't force those issues. You can't force, culture on a different culture, but we want to make the day out when you go to McDermott Park a broader, lengthier experience, hopefully bringing more joy to the fan, more connection to the club, and certainly more revenue to the club. And so fan zones, we're not the first. We're not anywhere close to it. There have been lots of fan zones. Actually, at the last club I had an interest in at Cambridge United, they incorporated a fan zone starting, I'll say, 2-3 years ago. It's gotten a little bit better each year. A little bit bigger, a little bit better, beer sales at the fan zone and food sales at the fan zone and, clowns and games and the other things at the fan zone. Obviously, it brings people to the park earlier. It's positioned next to a merchandise sale location and, of course, can bring more revenue in that way. So it's a combination of the big picture of adding more of a lengthy, fun stay at the park with the what we've seen elsewhere with the practical elements from other clubs of fan zones. We're still a work in progress. I think we've had 5 games where 5 matches where it has occurred during my tenure. It could be 4, could be 6, but it's a wonderful thing on those sunny days in Scotland, even just a non-rainy day in Scotland, to get out in the fresh air before the game, spend a couple of hours with your fellow citizens and have some beer, have a snack, and have the kids run around if they want to in an open air environment. And so I love it. And hopefully we will be increasing the size and scope of it, and maybe even adding an additional fan zone over across on the east side of the stadium in the coming months and years. it's that hasn't been a big focus for me, to be honest with you. I think it's a great idea when it works, and we all know the risks that you take by merging the fans. It's before the game, so there's less likely to be animosity than after the game, I would say. But obviously, there's just built up animosity with certain parts of certain fan bases over the years. So that hasn't been a big influence, but I'm glad that it has worked so far. I'm glad that is an avenue, because we want to be a club that people travel to. That will help our revenue situation. And obviously, when they're there having a snack or buying a beer, that is helping our revenue situation. So I think it's great. Obviously, there are scenarios where that's not going to work. I could imagine a day where we have the equivalent of an away fan zone as well. So behind the north stand, we would have a small outdoor area with a food truck or a beer truck or what have you, and they would have their own away fan zone. So that is something that
There we go. That was the Agan Webb talking to Alistair last year as well. So if you want to see that interview again, well, why not watch the show again? It's been brilliant. But if you want to watch that interview on its own, it's okay. I'll forgive you. But go to the Scottish Football Zone and the Scottish Football Union YouTube channel. Too many words with football on it. It's terrible. Too many F's as well. No, I'm not going to say the other word that begins with F. Because it's on a Monday. I was thinking about Friday there. So but before we go, Alistair is going to get a wee sales pitch in about his book, because he can do that because, hey, it's my show. So Alistair, just tell people one more time about how you can get this book.
Well, first of all, let's say that the first print run actually sold out, so thank you to everybody who bought it. I think, again, as most people know, Brian and I give the money at the club, and the club have made a reasonable amount of money over the years from our books. So there have been 2 lots of reprints. I think the first reprint was 30 books. I think it's gone as well, so there's another 30. So you can go to the club, you go to the club shop in the town. If, like me, you happen to live an awful long way away and it's a bit far to go, especially seeing as petrol's going to quadruple in price in the next couple of days, then go online to Amazon, search under books for Walking Down the Dunkeld Road, and you can buy it from there. And please feel free to leave a review saying it's one of the best books you've ever read. That would also make me feel very happy, and Brian as well. And if you do get it, if you're too young to have gone to Muirton, there's a lot in it, but read the fans in between the chapters, read what fans are saying, and you think about, if you're in your 20s, 30s now, when you're, dare I say, as old as I am, or as old as most of the guys on that cover there, you'll be looking back at McDermott Park in exactly the same way. And that's the continuity of football, and that's what makes it just special. And for us, it's what makes St Johnstone special. For all those people there going back, way back, the 2 most important people in the club's history, Jeff Brown and Robert Campbell, these people lived and died for St Johnstone. Well, not Jeff's case because he's still with us, but that's why it matters so much.
Good before we finish up as well, Reagan has joined us. He's been doing the work behind the scenes to get the Agan Webb interview lined up. Well done, Reagan, for that. But it's brilliant to hear about other clubs' history, Reagan, about the book, about the testimonial dinner, about what different fan groups are up to as well, because sometimes football clubs get a bad name, but if you scratch underneath the surface, Reagan, they do brilliant. They do brilliant work.
I mean, there's so so many good clubs in Scottish football that do so much great work, and St Johnstone's a great example of that, because, like Alistair's saying, so many St Johnstone fans have got memories or tales that they can talk about with McDermott Park, and hopefully many St Johnstone fans buy the book and they enjoy it as well.
Yep. So thanks to everyone for tonight's show. It's been a real team effort here. So thanks to the back line of Alaska and Cam. Thanks to the midfield of Regan and Robbie. Yeah, we only went with 2 midfield tonight because we're the best team ever. And yeah, I'm the goalkeeper as well. So, you've been watching the Scottish Football Zone. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the channel, and you can watch us again. We'll be back on Wednesday night for the Aberdeen and Celtic game. We'll be on. Robbie, Regan, and myself will be on at 7:15 for the big build-up, and then after the game at 10 o'clock. So if you want to watch this show again, you can do so by subscribing to the Scottish Football Zone channel. And Alaska will be hoping, Callum, will be hoping to speak to you next season in the Premiership. And by the way, good luck with the testimonial as well. So thanks for watching tonight, and we'll see you on Wednesday night at 7:15.
You're watching the Scottish Football Zone with all the build-up and reactions.